Hi, it's Lee, and welcome to the Tesla Economist. Some investors are concerned that deliveries were not as high as they'd hoped, as high as we'd seen relatively in the past when prices were indeed higher. There's various theories being thrown around. One is that there is too much competition, which is the one that doesn't concern me. Currently, the vast majority of competition are making losses. If they ramped up further, then they would either continue making such a large loss that they would eventually go bankrupt, or they would finally work out how to make a profit. If they did indeed go bankrupt, then they are of no long-term threat to Tesla. If they go profitable, then it means the supply chains of EVs are improving and costs are reducing, which would also benefit Tesla, which means Tesla could reduce prices and thus increase demand. I'm of the belief that these demand concerns these investors have are of macro influence, as that is the biggest change we've seen since Tesla's demand was still abundant. These are still short-term concerns before EVs do get cheaper. What am I talking about? How you believe the future of transportation and whether it will or will not be fully electric, or not even fully electric necessarily, at least in the near time. It just needs to be a large enough part of the future. And as the industry grows, so will Tesla. Tesla will naturally grow with it. Oh, but by then there'll be lots of competition, blah blah. All this competition stuff is just for clickbait. We know there's no competition. We know that Tesla have such a lead against all other EVs that they can just keep lowering prices to gain market share. Tesla have already won the EV industry. It's not even close. It's game over by a long shot. That is not the question. The real question is, how big will the EV industry be? By which I mean, how many consumers will make the transition and go from ICE to electric? I know in the Tesla community, we have this narrative that the whole world will transition to electric and renewable energy and will live in some sort of utopia. But if this occurs, it's certainly not going to happen by 2030. 2030 is the year that most Tesla investors look to, as if it's the path to investing, and you have to ignore everything else that Wall Street and the media will throw at you to convince you that Tesla isn't the company you thought. 2030 is long enough to ride out any recession, and long enough for Tesla to hopefully finally ramp up to the 4680 sales by a long way. A possibility of solving FSD, several more models out, energy growing, and a plethora of other potentials that should all be showing positive signs by 2030. You just need to hold your stock for that long, and you might see a return of something between 5, 10, or maybe 20 times. That is the potential we have, and hence why it is so exciting. As compelling as an electric car is, though, it doesn't necessarily mean people will be lined up around the block to buy them. Yes, the industry is growing, but the vast majority of people are still buying ICE cars. Sure, one obvious reason is the price of electric cars, but consumers have the right to choose to buy, and if the attraction to electric is not strong enough for the vast majority of consumers to pay extra for it, then they'll keep buying ICE. Unless governments step in and actually ban ICE sales, consumers can still buy used ICE cars too, of course, if they still can't afford a new electric car. And of course, the EV subsidies help a lot too. Obviously, Tesla is the one company that is actually reducing the cost of EVs and taking the prices down to below parity for the ICE equivalent in some cases. And Tesla is the one EV company showing that there is a path that is actually possible to have similar production costs as ICE. But will there be enough people in the world that want to move to electric still? I mean, it seems obvious to me as they're superior, especially a Tesla. But when you look at the legacy competition, they actually aren't that much better than the gas cars, at least when it comes to driving and features. They're just less noisy, smelly, and you don't have to go to gas stations. These are really the only advantages of electric over ICE when it comes to non-Tesla EVs, whereas various ICE vehicles offer all sorts of features due to so much variety available. Put it this way, I'm a car enthusiast and I would not buy an electric car if there wasn't a Tesla. There are other cars out there that I would rather have over a Ford Mustang Mach-E or a Hyundai Ioniq 5. These cars aren't great. There are much nicer cars for the money. Tesla has had to convince consumers to buy a Tesla over the fact it's just simply electric. On top of that, electric is so complex to manufacture, there's simply a lot fewer models and versions available. You have to compromise somewhat given the limited selection, whereas ICE offers a suitable model for just about every type of lifestyle. So there needs to be more compelling reasons for consumers to buy electric over ICE. I don't think consumers are naturally moving in that direction at the same rate we saw people switch over to smartphones. Obviously, due to the sheer difference in size between a phone and a car, it's going to take a much longer time for the industry to evolve and develop. The issue is cost still. If Legacy could make as many electric models as ICE models and make the same amount of profit at the same price points, then that would be different and interesting to see. But I'm not sure this will be the case, at least anytime soon. Although Tesla have shown the way in how it is possible to save costs in manufacturing to achieve this. So it will come down to the rest of the industry to copy what Tesla are doing in order to have a chance. And eventually EV demand should rise as these vehicles become more compelling and offer more variety. You know what though? The future is very difficult to predict. Electric vehicles appear to be here to stay. It just seems like everyone is having trouble in making them, aside from Tesla. Well, even Tesla too. Tesla are behind in their targets as well. Electric vehicles are very difficult to produce. Everyone is struggling. Remember Elon said how difficult ramping to volume production was? And to do it profitably is basically impossible. So the point I'm trying to make is that rather than focusing on Tesla with things like deliveries for each quarter and short-term noise, think about the industry as a whole. Will it continue to grow? How big will it get? Because I assure you, Tesla will be the largest company to benefit from that growth, and Tesla's stock price will grow along with it. In a couple of years, the industry will jump quite a bit as the biggest selling car companies finally have their battery factories available too. This industry won't grow at a steady pace. There'll be some big jumps, especially when Tesla can finally ramp up 4680 cells to high volume production. We're going to see in the region of about $500 billion invested into EVs and batteries this decade. That is a phenomenal amount and will boost the industry tremendously. So there's plenty of signs that the EV movement will be big and grow further, especially if backed and subsidized by governments too. And why are governments backing the EV movement? 2 words: climate change. And I think that is the real movement. Not so much electric cars, but a global path in order to do what we can to prevent any further climate change. Whether you believe it or not, I don't think it makes any difference. The narrative is out. We don't want to risk destroying the planet and everything we've created. Yet the path Elon and Tesla are taking us on is not one of austerity, but still abundant lives to achieve this mission. So, in a way, investing in Tesla is a way of investing in the belief of climate change and that the world will go renewable. Tesla benefits in so many ways from a future in that direction, which is the future all the powers that be are pointing at. This would result in a somewhat forced demand by governments, possibly more tax on non-renewable sources to further subsidize the renewable movement. Governments are doing what they can to increase the charging infrastructure too, along with incentives for battery and cell production, more solar. The US is leading the way in EV incentives, and in a few years we will see the impact these have had on the country and how more popular EVs would have become by that stage. However, in reality, those subsidies would have likely had more of an effect on climate change if they were spent in developing nations. America is already using fairly efficient vehicles with low emissions since the whole Clash for Clunkers campaign. The emissions are so much worse in places like Indonesia, but America wants the world to think they are the furthest ahead in technology and innovation, so seeing that most EV drivers in that nation is good marketing for them. And I'm just referring to Tesla's EV business. Remember, Tesla is more than just a car company. FSD would obviously push Tesla's demand further, but that's another topic. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.